What impact might picks 11 through 20 in the 2024 NFL draft have on fantasy football? We continue on looking at our mock draft, only on this edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today and every day. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day as well. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy betting. That includes free agency and the draft for sportingnews.com. Today's show will continue part two now of our mock draft and see what the picks in the first round, the impact projections there that could happen for fantasy football. So we'll get into that. We'll have a latest 7-round mock up at Sporting News. Michelle Medzouk, my regular co-host, is out this week. So catching you up on draft prospects and all the good stuff while she's gone here. And I'll be gone next week. So we'll have a lot of good stuff with her as well. So yeah, a lot of things to break down today's show. We'll get into some very interesting picks there on the board in the middle of the first round from 11 through 20. Before we do that, I got to tell you this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so we went through picks 1 through 10. You can check out that show. We started with Caleb Williams, the fine quarterback, standout quarterback to the Bears, the number 1 overall. We went all the way through number 10 with Jets and Rome Odunze, the wide receiver out of Washington. So we get to start right off the bat at number 11 here as we continue. Part 2 starts now with the Vikings at number 11. There's a lot of rumors now that they've acquired a second first-round pick. That's right. The Vikings do pick now later in this round. The Texans and Browns had that pick earlier, but now the Vikings traded in. They're circling, potentially looking for a big move up here in the draft. So something we were definitely going to monitor here. Can they get it done? So really excited to see what the Vikings potentially can do here. And really, it's a good spot for them at 11 because if no one trades up, they should get the 4th quarterback off the board. They'll also be looking to do that as well. His name is J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. I think he's established himself, separated well from Bo Nix now and Michael Penix Jr., 2 guys that have been looking pretty good. I mean, Nix has had a long career, pretty solid floor here. And now Michael Penix Jr. has the big arm. And we know J.J. McCarthy outdueled him in the national championship game, Michigan and Washington. So McCarthy, again, the crazy knock on him is, Michigan did not ask him to do too much. But we've seen him do a lot since their season ended, and we've seen him win a lot, make a lot of plays, tough playmaker, has pretty good athleticism, good deep live arm with some accuracy to put some nice touch on those lobs downfield. So I really like J.J. McCarthy, and we've talked about it. This Vikings landing spot, there's an argument that this is better here than Caleb Williams to the Bears. I mean, Williams just the talent alone and the way the Bears have rolled out things. There's a chance this Vikings quarterback, whether it's McCarthy, Nix, or someone else, or if they trade up to get Drake May, might have to sit, and they transition with Sam Darnold at first in this offense there. It's a Kevin O'Connell offense, but you have Sam Darnold, who also knows their new quarterback coach pretty well, his former Jets teammate, Josh McCown. So when you look at this potential here, McCarthy is in a good spot because who's he going to have? Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson when he returns healthy. You got a new good receiving back in Aaron Jones. There's a lot to look forward to. The Vikings also should be in the market for a third receiver to replace KJ Osborne, who signed with the Patriots. So a lot of excitement there with the Vikings to get JJ's next QB, and it could be another JJ McCarthy. So very interesting that they moved on from Kirk Cousins, but they knew they need to get younger, turn the page. They need some money to pay Jefferson. Not paying a Cousins allows them to do that. And the next quarterback is going to be lifted because of it. And don't forget about their up front as well. Christian Darrisaw, again, one of the better young offensive tackles in this league. So you're going to protect McCarthy, give him plenty of weapons, maybe have a better running game with Aaron Jones. So all the things are pointing up now with the atmosphere before. I think it was Kirk Cousins maybe lifting up the Vikings offense. Now you're going to have the Vikings offense really being a support system for whoever that quarterback is. And right now you'd say it's going to be McCarthy or May ending up in Minnesota. All right, number 12, the Broncos really need to look at a quarterback. They have Jared Stidham as their lead quarterback right now. Not a lot to see there after they unceremoniously released Russ Wilson, ended up as the contingency for the Steelers between him and Justin Fields. So really, they just wanted to move on from Russell Wilson really bad. There's not much to see here at this Broncos quarterback room with Stidham leading the way. Just nothing you want to really feel good about here in fantasy if Stidham has to start, especially without Jerry Jeudy. He's gone. I mean, you have some receivers there, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, and Marvin Mims to build on, some tight ends, Greg Dulcich and Adam Troutman. But again, I wouldn't say it's the greatest spot. I think this is more wait and see. So it's if it's Bo Nix or Michael Penix here going at the spot. Right now I have Bo Nix as the pick for the Broncos. It's going to be a while. I mean, you look at Drew Brees and Derek Carr and even to some degree Justin Herbert here in the Joe Lombardi offense going back a little bit. Detroit, you had a little bit of Matthew Stafford. So you're looking for a big arm, can push it downfield a little bit. So I think Bo Nix really fits what the Broncos want to do with Lombardi and Sean Payton as he takes over there. And on the flip side, the Saints are going to more of a West Coast offense. Now the Broncos are going to this style of offense that is a little bit of a hybrid with Peyton and Lombardi and some of the concepts there. I would say now the Saints are moving on here with the Clint Kubiak 49er style of offense. So again, there's some potential here for this wide receiver. I'm just not liking the Broncos offense overall. And their offensive line kind of underachieved last year despite adding Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey. I don't know what you're going to get. The running game is underwhelming. I want to see Sutton and Patrick be able to stay healthy here. So, again, Nix is more a wait-and-see approach should he land with the Broncos, but there's something to be had there. Now, the Raiders, this would put them in a tough spot. This is why they might think about trading up, right, if they want to get McCarthy or Nix before this run is down, because I don't think they're going to go after Penix just for the big arm. There are some question marks with him. And the Raiders also have Gardner Minshew as a bit of a bridge. They still have potential to develop Aiden O'Connell a little bit more. I still think Minshew is probably going to be the bridge starting quarterback. Now, the other position the Raiders could be thinking about beyond the defense, they did get Christian Wilkins as an impact defensive tackle to supplement what Max Crosby does in the pass rush already in free agency. I think offensive tackle would come into play, and specifically right tackle. They need somebody there opposite Colton Miller there. They could also kick Miller back to right tackle. He's been good in that role before. So the guy that I look at is Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State, staying on the west side there, getting a nice blocker, also helping the new running game with Zamir White as a centerpiece instead of Josh Jacobs for the moment, along with Alexander Madison. So, again, Fuaga would kind of solve a lot of issues. He has got the power and athleticism, again, to play the left side or right side. That's going to be good to keep Minshew or whoever their quarterback ends up being if they go to the second round for a quarterback, Penix, or wait a little bit and go there. That's something you look at, but he'd be a really good addition. I think he would boost all the offensive skill parts here, be able to stretch the field a little bit better with Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and the receivers. And then also, again, Zamir White gets a benefit here of having another strong, durable, athletic blocker they could have. So the Raiders definitely could think offensive line here on the edge for their first round pick. So that's a look at picks number 11 through 13. We'll tackle 14 through 17, more of a defensive spin on those picks, but we do have one offensive pick in that group, so we'll get into that. Then we'll close the show looking at what you might get there from the Bengals, Steelers, and Rams. So a lot of good teams that we'll explore in today's show and the fantasy football potential of all these offenses. All right. It is sometimes tricky to get tickets to last minute things here that we want at the best price. Well, GameTime is going to take that worry out of you. And really, I've had some frustrating ticket experiences where you've seen things spike up all of a sudden. You're waiting and you're looking to get the best price. Well, you don't have to do that with GameTime, where GameTime is going to set you up with the best seats, just easy, a few clicks that you can get. You can find last minute killer deals, all in prices. You check out views from your seat and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You get last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals to check out. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, whether it's a concert, comedy show, or just one of your favorite sporting events. There's views from all seats in the venue that you can check out. Lowest price guaranteed. And there's also event cancellation protection. So if you have a job loss protection as well, you can think about it and then get a way to get your money back. So that's all great that you can do. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On. That's LOCKED ON to take advantage of that Game Time offer. Again, it's a really great way to buy tickets. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, programming reminder here on the show. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn on the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for your everyday to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now let's get into some of your teams here that are picking in the middle of the first round. So if you're a Saints fan here, and shout out to Locked On Saints host here, Ross Jackson, at number 14, they could go in many different directions, but they've been really disappointed with Trevor Penning on the offensive line. Ryan Ramczyk is battling a tough injury and coming back here, but I think you need to think about the future or immediacy there at offensive line. So you can look at Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. I think you'd be a good addition here. You can look at him as a potential swing tackle, maybe an upgrade over Penning, help with this offense, keep Derek Carr straight. He also has the athleticism here. Again, it's a new Shanahan-style zone blocking, athletic type offensive lineman or coveted here. Fashanu can give them that up front, really help as an asset, run blocking for Alvin Kamara. And what they have there in the backfield and really boost also the pass protection, keep Derek Carr upright. He was hot down the stretch here with his receivers, and I think that can continue with some really nice weapons here for him going forward. We know what he could get out of Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, so this would help to have one more blocker, and they'll also take a little bit pressure off Juwan Johnson or anyone else at tight end to come in and help block here. So Fashanu would be a great pick to help the Saints offense. Now, the next pick is belonging to the Colts. And look, they need some quarterback help. They did bring back Kenny Moore, but he's more of a slot ace here, but they're pretty weak on the outside here, moving on from Stephon Gilmore last year. So Nate Wiggins has a lot of speed. I think he would come to play. It's hard to know who exactly is the top corner. It's pretty tight between Wiggins, Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo. You also have in that mix Terrion Arnold out of Alabama and Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama as well. But Wiggins would make a lot of sense. Give them a playmaking corner with a lot of speed here to play off more. Pretty good pass rush, we know, with DeForest Buckner leading the way inside for the Colts. So defensive minded, I think, is a good way to go for the Colts. But they also are in play for one more player that I'm going to mention here, Brock Bowers. They've been tied to, I've also mocked Bowers to the Colts before, but they're very intrigued about what Bowers can do. They've had a real mess with this tight end by committee with Colin Granson, and they added a couple guys to that last year as well. So again, you've had Granson, you've had Mo Ali Cox, you've had Will Mallory in the mix, you've had Jelani Woods, a lot of guys there. So maybe clean up the committee and just get one guy who can make a lot of plays for you. You can be the new Dallas Goedert in the Shane Stankin offense, playing off the receivers. Maybe Alec Pierce can emerge here. Maybe they draft another wide receiver, or we get some more out of Josh Downs to complement re-sign Michael Pittman Jr. So a lot of things you can think of, but the Colts also should be on the radar for everyone with one Brock Bowers. At 16, I should say, it's Jared Verse. I have him going to the Seahawks. They need some edge rushing help here. For their new edge rushing specialist defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, his Ravens led the league in sacks last year. They need some help. They have Leonard Williams on the inside, really upgraded quite a bit at linebacker with Tyrell Dodson and others, but they need another presence outside to go after the passer. So Verse could really make this defense start to be intriguing for fantasy. We know how good McDonald had the Ravens going. So something you can look at there. Now we go up to the next pick, and it's the Jaguars. And we talked about Terry Arnold. It's hard to know who the best corner is, but I think of three teams we're going to take corners here in the first round. I think you look at the Colts, you look at the Jags, and you look at the Buccaneers. Maybe your landing spots for these other corners here. It's pretty close. I would also put the Eagles in that mix. It's just a preference of corner that each of these teams have. Right now, it's pretty close, but between, again, Wiggins, Arnold, Mitchell, McKinstry for me on the board on who the best corner is. I think it's just the flavor of that scheme and what you want. I think Jags have been looking for a guy with some playmaking attitude ever since they moved on from Jalen Ramsey. They didn't keep Darius Williams here in free agency, so they're looking for an alpha corner. Arnold could really add to the playmaking to their defense behind Josh Allen in the pass rush and some of the guys they've added, Trayvon Walker, we know, through the draft. So something we're going to look at with the Jags being a little bit more of a fantasy football asset in that capacity, as they've also changed defensive coordinators to Ryan Nielsen, the former leader there of what the Falcons were doing in that new offense, or new defense, I should say, coming over from the Saints, some aggressiveness, some playmaking potential there, especially with Josh Allen franchise tagged and not going anywhere up front. All right, we will get through picks 18, 19, 20. Those belong right now to the Bengals, Rams, and Steelers. So we'll see what those teams are up to. A couple of those teams need some more offensive help. So we'll break down where they might go in our final segment. Don't forget, we will get through picks 21 through 32 on part 3 of this show that we'll do there on Wednesday. All right, big week this week in the NCAA tournament. We've switched here from the first and second rounds to the Sweet 16. That action will begin Thursday night as we have a couple more rounds to determine who will be the Final Four and get to Phoenix for that event. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament all the way through cutting down the nets in Phoenix. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Good time to do that. Get in on the futures. Maybe you like UConn, maybe you like Houston, maybe you like a sleeper such as Marquette, Arizona. So many good options there to look at for winning it all here. And futures are not too long away, right? It's just around the corner. You might have a little bit more comfort level on picking the champion now that you've had a good sample size through 2 rounds, and you just want to get in on all the action in the 4 days that are coming up this week. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to bet on college hoops until they crown a champion there in Phoenix. All right, it is time to finish part 2 of the first round mock draft, see how these teams might play out with their decisions for fantasy football and help us. And we want these teams to always get better, but again, don't force it. If you've got good shape here on the offensive side, defense also helps, because we want more defenses to come on the radar as streamers as well. Now, Bengals are sitting at 19. They could, I should say 18, they could be looking at some wide receiver help, depending on what happens with T. Higgins. Tyler Boyd has not been re-signed, so they might need a slot option, but we also know this draft is pretty deep in those type of wide receivers. So with Jamar Chase and that salary coming up, I don't think they're going to go wide receiver the first round. They should be in play a little bit for Bowers, but again, they could be happy with Mike Gesicki at tight end. So something to look at there if they are not throwing too much to the tight end, and find their slot receiver later. So I like J.C. Latham. They did lose an Alabama offensive tackle, Jonah Williams, in free agency. They really need to keep intact in front of Joe Burrow coming off that major injury here. So J.C. Latham is a very good athlete, has some power as well, going to help the new running back, Zach Moss, in the running game. So I do like that quite a bit for the Bengals. So going to J.C. Latham. Now, again, wide receiver, I think, would be on the back burner a little bit. Tight end, they could look later to Jatavion Sanders or Cade Stover or some athlete such as that to stash in this offense there. But again, I think they're content with Gesicki. They want to improve their blocking a little bit more. Again, they'll probably make Higgins play through this. So if you have Chase and Higgins, you get a slot later in the draft, you're in business here. Moss is a decent pass catcher as well. And again, Gesicki is all right. So not bad at all here with the Bengals if they can get offensive line, helped to keep Joe Burrow upright in our fantasy football lineups after his second injury-shortened season of his career. Now, at 19, actually, behind them are the Rams. And the Rams have also been a little tied to Brock Bowers. They've also been tied a little to taking a quarterback here, anywhere from J.J. McCarthy to Bo Nix to Michael Penix Jr., that they might be thinking about the future. Right now, Matthew Stafford's backup is Jimmy Garoppolo, but Garoppolo more there for the correlation he has between Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan offenses. So you have Garoppolo there as a backup capable. So it wouldn't be for the backup purposes, but it would be someone they would want to groom here in a year or two to take over for Stafford if that's an indication that Stafford is not going to be here for the long haul with his injuries. But he played well down the stretch last year. That might rejuvenate him a little bit. So I think first, I think you have to think about defense if you're the Rams. Now, they lost a key asset here in Aaron Donald. He's retiring. So up front, you'd say, okay, we're going to go after defensive tackle. And there's a potential here, right? Brian Murphy out of Texas. You also have Johnny Newton out of Illinois. This could be in play. But the Rams also reportedly like Cooper DeJean a lot out of Iowa. Very versatile playmaker, can line up everywhere, kind of a chess piece they can move around the board. Here, keep in mind the Rams have Chris Shula, new defensive coordinator. They would like this type of player, right? Hybrid, can make a lot of plays here. Good knack, instincts on the ball, really good in coverage, really good run support. So I look at that. Cooper DeJean looks a very good fit here for the Rams at 19 again. They could surprise them McCarthy again, but then he would have no fantasy value because you'd think they would transition a bit with Stafford and Garoppolo, not only having the clear number one, who's having a good end of the season last year, or just having a rookie developmental backup the way that Stetson Bennett was. Now they actually have a legit number two in Jimmy Garoppolo. So we'd have to wait and see if a quarterback went to the Rams to have any kind of impact, but it would still be a good landing spot, right? We just have to wait on it because any quarterback that lands with Sean McVay, with his acumen, especially with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp maybe having a little bit left in the tank, Kyron Williams, a decent running game, still a pretty intact offensive line. You say that player's going to be intriguing. It's just not going to be here in 2024 should the Rams go for quarterback. And finally, the Steelers could go in different directions. I know they moved on from Deontay Johnson, traded him to the Panthers. So Johnson giving them a shot at a number one who's very technically sound. The Steelers move on knowing, again, they're going to have more 12 personnel, so less 3 wide receiver sets. They're just going to need George Pickens there and a complement to get on the field there with him. They also, again, have to think about, okay, our blocking is going to be better if we use the 12 personnel. We're going to have an emphasis on the offensive line and depth and run blocking. So you look at Amarius Mims out of Georgia. So really, I like these guys pretty neck and neck here in the draft. So really would not mind that at all in this situation. So really good if the Steelers can add a little bit to that offensive line. Again, we've talked about Dan Moore Jr., how terrible he is. They did get Isaac Samalo, the guard, in free agency last year, as well as drafting Broderick Jones. I think he's best suited on the left side. They played him on the right side. So now if you get him on the left and you can put Mims on the right, now you're in business. Your offensive line is rebuilt with a younger, sturdier look here and give you all sorts of options here in that offense. And really, we need all the help we can get to figure out Wilson and Fields, how we want to get the best production there, and see what we're going to get going forward at Pickens, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, the remaining principal weapons, and that includes Pat Freeman at the tight end. So all these things we do definitely want to pay attention to with the Steelers, what they're thinking about, and hopefully they go offensive-minded here in the first round to make Mike Tomlin feel a little bit better, right, about what they've done with Fields and Wilson and making the transition up front. So I think the Steelers will emphasize the offensive line quite a bit. They also moved on from the center, Mason Cole. So they need to do some things on the interior as well to really retain themselves as a power and really maximize some of the skill position players they have now as they turn the page with the stronger armed Wilson or the very mobile Fields. Wilson can do some running as well. So we're going to watch because I think it's very important the Steelers just don't go down the defensive route from stash, say a pass rusher or a corner. They really need to address that offensive line. So good stuff there. So we still have 21 through 32 picks to make in the first round of our mock draft with a fantasy spin for you, of course, unlocked on fantasy football. So good time to get in all here. Make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports today for all the good stuff there that have to offer here on the network, catching up on the biggest storylines that you need to know across sports. It's a great show. I can't recommend enough there on the network. So good way to tie everything together, things that we're talking about as well. So check it out. It's the Locked On first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV. The free Fire TV channels app, Locked On Sports Today, is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app, as well as this show. We're Locked On Fantasy Football for Locked On Fantasy Football. This has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great day, everyone.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast